Good morning, everybody. Welcome. I just want to thank you for joining us. Thank you for registering. Over 280 persons have registered. They may not all join us today, but certainly we hope that those who are not with us live will be able to watch the recording later via the recording link that you will receive, as well as watching it via our YouTube channel, Caribbean Center for Development Administration. My name is Lois Parkes. Unfortunately, I won't be able to share my video today, but hopefully we will still be able to have an engaging discussion. This is our first webinar for 2026. And so let me wish you a happy new year. Well, the year is not so new anymore. It is the last week of January. But if one thing is certain, one thing that is accelerating is the pace of change. We've been hearing that forever. But definitely, I think we can all agree that the thing has accelerated. I am joining you from Jamaica, and in Jamaica, we would say the thing turn up, right? The pace has grown exponentially. And the question is, are we change ready? And so today's webinar is not to provide a lot of answers per se, maybe some insights, and definitely we want to encourage a dialogue around this question. Are we change ready? So if you are joining us for the very first time, where have you been? And so welcome to you. And I hope you will not be a stranger, but you will join our wonderful community. You will sign up via our website to receive regular updates on not only our offerings, but also when the next webinar will be. And so we like to do these webinars as a part of our ongoing learning and development support, not only to our alumni, but to all of our stakeholders and beyond. And so this is your learning hour. And if you want to get the most out of it, we want to encourage you to follow these guidelines that you see on the screen. Close all software applications, apart from Zoom, of course. Mute your phones. If you're in the office, maybe you can't mute your phone, maybe turn the ringer down. Remind your colleagues that this is your learning hour. Trust me, they will not die without you. Allow you the opportunity to lean in and to get all you can. Bandwidth is sometimes still an issue for many of us, so you want to plug in your internet cable if you have it available. Now, for our webinars, you don't necessarily have to use your microphone, but we do allow during the discussion period for persons to raise their hand and to speak. And so if you want to participate in that way, then of course your microphone has to be working. But definitely, as many of you have already found it, the chat feature, you can type in the chat, you can use the various reaction buttons. And as usual, we always want to know where you're joining us from today. Like I said, my name is Lois Parkes, and I'm joining you from Jamaica. Although CARICAD is headquartered in Barbados, the capital of Barbados, Roebuck Street, Bridgetown, Barbados, is the exact location. So can you type in the chat and let me know, where are you joining us from today? And as usual, we always have some folks from BVI. Yes. And so guess what? What the government of BVI has done, is that they have allowed that this attendance in this webinar counts towards their mandatory learning hours. And so if you have registered from BVI, do let us know. And so I see Denise joining us from Antigua and Barbuda. Welcome. Right. I'm seeing lots of good mornings. Chantel joining us from Trinidad and Tobago. Bianca from Dominica. Hakeem from the BVI. Ron also from BVI. Lauren from BVI. Linda from BVI. Mauricia, hope I'm pronouncing that right, from BVI. Ian Michael from the Nature Isle, Dominica. Simone. Simone is one of our alumni from the BVI. Danny from Dominica. Kembra from BVI. Yes. Let me see who else. Dr. Arlene Penn from BVI. Marsha Ann joining also from BVI. Our DPS and alumni from the government of Barbados, Faye Prescott. Welcome, Faye. Naricia from BVI. I'm Monique Q. I think I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, but joining in from Virgin Gorda, BVI. Yes. Michelle joining us from Sweet Tea TNT. Ay, ay, ay. Yes. Renee joining from BVI. Shawana from BVI. Let me see who else. Renee from BVI. Sheldine from Barbados. Norma from Barbados. Juana from BVI. Another alumni, Vicky Samuel Letsom from BVI. Laura from BVI. BVI in the house. Casey. Michelle Paul Burke. No, Michelle, they say it was so nice you have to do it twice. Yes. Michelle is doing her second program with us. She's finishing up um our Leading Change workshop, joining us from Barbados. So Ron is asking, is my name Lloyd, Lloyd Parkes? No, that is a musician. That's a very old joke, Ron. My name is Lois, Lois. Surname Parkes. No relation to the musician at all. All right, Colleen Hazel from BVI, welcome. Wendy Barton from TNT, Curtis from BVI, Chad from BVI, Christoph from BVI, Latae from BVI, Alvin from BVI, Heather, Darius from BVI, Susan from Anguilla, Jocelyn from BVI, Claire from BVI, Colette Clayton from BVI, Michelle Tomlinson from my hometown, Kingston, Jamaica, Michaela from Barbados, Carmen Sita from BVI, Priscilla also joining from the Ministry of Tourism in Jamaica, my fellow member of the Human Resource Management Association of Jamaica. Dean from Belize, I love it. Welcome, Dean. Nerida from BVI, Cherise from BVI, Ashley from BVI. Yes. Alderian, my colleague from Jamaica. Welcome. Michelle Bejan from BVI. Yes, the surname and the country conflicts, eh? All right. Annette from BVI. And look here. Let us do a drum roll. One of my coaches from the motherland, Ghana, Enam Kondade is joining us from Ghana. Enam, welcome. Really, really good to have you, Enam. Marlene from the BVI, Avalon from Trinidad, Orville from BVI, Walter from Trinidad, Glenda from BVI, Shima, Gail, Carlene. I'm telling you, Gypsy from BVI, Kimberly from BVI, Iris, past Postmaster General of BVI, welcome. Jaquel, sorry, joining from Guyana. Rosemary from BVI, another alumni. Silver from BVI. Onika and Daniel, wait, am I getting this right? Onika and Daniel Wayne, Guyana in the house, welcome, yes. Fabrina, my dear Fabrina, our alumni from, well, I don't want to say she's from the Service Commission Department because she may have moved on to bigger and brighter things, but Fabrina is our alumni joining us from the Commonwealth of Dominica, not to be confused with Dominica Republic. All right. I am so happy to see you all. No, clearly this is a topic that is of interest to you all. I mean, over 280 persons registered, then clearly it is of interest. And so I am sure we talk about change. Many of you would have seen this acronym VUCA. Every workshop you go, they say we're living in a VUCA world, right? Living in a VUCA world. VUCA standing for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. But digging into our African heritage, there is a Zulu word that is very close to that. I think pronounced the same way, VUCA. but I think it's usually spelled with a K. And it means to rise and to take action. And as I was preparing for this webinar, I thought about, the VUCA world where we feel uncertain and we feel that things are ambiguous and complex and, you know, it's almost chaotic, right? And I thought of that as being one end of the spectrum in terms of where we can show up in the face of change. And then the other end of the spectrum is when we take it on, we rise, we take action, we embrace it. We have agency, we have power, we can do something about it, right? That's a place of strength and confidence, right? And if you were to look at them as being somewhat on a spectrum, right? And on a scale of 1 to 10, use in the chat, tell me, where do you fall and why? Where do you fall and why? Are you all the way over by 1, where you feel like, boy, I can't manage anymore? Everything is so uncertain. I feel uncertain. I feel strange. I feel like I'm having out of body experiences as these changes come my way. Everything seems ambiguous. Are you at the other end where you're like 100% powered up? Bring it on. In Jamaica, we say bullbuck and duppy conqueror kind of emotion. Where are you on the spectrum? So I'm seeing some responses here. Man, people doing very well here now. Yes, yes, yes. So Ron is 8. Bianca is 8. Caris is 8. And I want to especially welcome, I see Bianca and Caris here. They're in our current leadership program that we're doing in the National Bank of Dominica. Welcome. Alvin is a 9. Gail is a 8, Aldrin is a 8, Vicky is a 7, Rosemary, you and I are kind of in the same zone, 5. I think, if I'm honest, I'm kind of right in the middle there. Rosemary says, the complexity is exciting and there have been amazing opportunities to develop new solutions. Indeed. Kendra 7, Sean 7, Marsha 7, Cherise is 8, Nalesta is 7, Karen is from the BVI, welcome. Marisha is 7. Dr. Penn is 9. Juana says, I'm between 7 and 8. Karen Vanterpool is 8. Jocelyn is 8. Let's see. Norma is 9. Norma is ready for the change. Just need to be more open to the technology. I hearing you. Yes. Suzanne is a 6. Marley, Linda, Kimberly are 7s. Canberra is a 6. Robert is between 5 and 6. Clayton is a 7. Michelle feels like a 4. She says, look, operating in a very uncertain environment, but still taking action where possible. I love that, Michelle. I love that. Annette is a 7. Arvid is a 7. Darius is a 8. Wendy is a 7. Ashley between 8 and 9. Danelle is 5. Glenda between 6 and 7. Right? And Narita is agreeing with Michelle, our sister from TNT, who says, yes, things feel uncertain, but still taking action. And really, that is all we could really ask of ourselves. Are we taking action as opposed to just being frozen by everything? All right. So before I get into the rest of the meat, I just want to say again, because some people would have joined us, and some of you are joining us for the first time. And so I wanted to share just a wee bit about CARICAD and the work that we do, right? Now, CARICAD, the Caribbean Center for Development Administration, we came into existence over 45 years ago, right? And we support 17 member states in the area of public sector transformation. And what you see listed here are the range of services, technical assistance, capacity building support that we provide to member states in areas such as organizational development and design, public financial management support, strategic planning and RBM systems, business process analysis, leadership development, monitoring evaluation, change management, contingency and business continuity planning, among others. And so I just want to share with you what are some of the things that we're doing right now as we speak. And although we are a small team, we in fact pull we pull our weight well above our size, right? And so these are some of the things that we are doing. And some of you might be acquainted with some of these. So starting over on the left hand, we have been since 2024, every 2 months we release a new part of our Digital Explainer series. And these are really informational frameworks and detailed guides that offer support to member states. They're real tools to support various aspects of public sector transformation, right? Including things like succession planning, public sector transformation schemas, etc. We are also working right now with a number of clients in terms of developing their results-based management frameworks for their operational plans, for their strategic plan. And that includes helping them to develop the plan and capacity building around this. We do a lot of climate surveys designs, and we're doing a lot of that now. We might not always call the name of the country because people don't necessarily want their names called out, but we're currently working one of our member states customs department to develop their change management plan. We work with one of our ministries of public admin, a whole strategic alignment and transformation, working with one of our social security boards, doing their organizational structure review. We're involved with other clients doing job analysis, job description writing, and developing key performance parameters. We're providing support to prepare an agricultural transformation strategy. We also do a lot of work with partners. And so one of the partnerships that we have now is with CRIF. And we are finalizing the design and development of an integrated country risk management program. So please do sign up for our updates so you can learn when that program is rolling out and whether or not you'll be able to register and how. We also have a partnership with United Nations Department for Economic and Social Affairs, along with ECLAC. And that project, we're in the final year of that partnership. Well, not that specific partnership. The partnership continues beyond that, where we have been providing support to selected member states around the area of changing mindsets to support innovation and public sector transformation. We also have a partnership with an organization called INCOS. And they have actually done webinars for us here in this space. And what we're doing specifically with them through our partnership is to integrate artificial intelligence into our respective tools and in the tools that we're developing. So chief among those right now is our public sector transformation assessment tool, PSTAT, right? And we're at the end stage of that development. And once that is being rolled out, you will be advised. We'll invite persons to work with us so that we can actually give them a thorough assessment of where are they in terms of public sector transformation. So it helps them to set that baseline from which they can then develop their transformation strategies. We're also working on another tool. One of the things that especially that we cover in our capacity building around leadership is helping persons, civil servants, interface more successfully with the political administration. And so we actually have an assessment tool that we are rolling out soon that can assess the quality of that political administrative interface. And of course, we have our respective leadership development programs. This week, we actually finished our scheduled leading change workshop. Our transformational leadership development program starts next month. The deadline for that has actually gone. However, we do have a few spaces left. And so if you are interested, we will be happy to accept late applications, but we really want it in this week. And we are doing customized leadership programs for 2 other governments and entities. And of course, you are right here in our ongoing webinar series. And our webinars are free, people. Free, free, free. So when you see the advertisements, please share them widely with your teams, with other stakeholders, with your friends. All right. So getting into the topic, the imperative for change. Are we change ready? And I want you to share in the chat with me. I'm going to just draw a line here. Welcome to Keturah. Keturah is apologizing for joining late. No worries, Keturah. You can go back to the recording when you get it and just listen to what you might have missed. But you didn't miss all that much. And so, folks, tell me, what are some of the changes that you are being bombarded by? And I want you to type them in the chat. What are the changes we are being bombarded by? And so I will start. I think the big one right now is AI, and Ron agrees with me. Yes, right? No, everybody say AI. No, I'm sure it's not only AI. What are some other changes? Nobody has write AI, right? What are some other changes? Chat GPT, yes. Compliance, digitization, yes, yes. I would also add, I would say climate change, you know, yes. What's happening in the geopolitical space? Um, yes. Changes in foreign policy, changes in how in education, Ron says, we're changing more inclusive education. Bianca said organizational changes. Yes. Many organizations, you're seeing people are retiring at faster paces, new leadership coming in, there's legislative changes, changes in national policies, changes in attitudes, Nietzsche says societal and demographic shifts. We now have the Gen Zs coming into the workplace. Ron says salary. We don't know if the salary changing, or maybe cost of living is changing and the salary is not. Changes in risks, says Keturah, changing in education policies and other policies, right? Cybersecurity issues, workplace culture is changing. Yes, yes. Um, One that has really fascinated me, and maybe the changes in budgets. Yes, I'm seeing that. So some of us are getting smaller budgets. Indeed. Um, Robotics, changes around data management and data protection, more rigorous requirements for public officers. Yes. I would also add, no, it has been said broadly, talk about demographic changes, but there are changes in terms of our age demographic, our age profile. Our population is actually aging, right? And our birth rate is dropping. And there was a recent interview with Prime Minister Mia Mottley, and she was quoting some recent research data that came out of ECLAC. And they said by 2050, I hope I'm quoting it correctly, by 2050, 1 in 2 Barbadians are going to be, well, middle age and over. I don't want to quote the exact age that was given, but it was, up there, right? And it is a similar kind of profile around the region. So if you have an aging population, high levels of migration, right? Um, yes, what that's a change that we're seeing. Jaquel says the digital first pressure, infrastructural changes in Guyana. Oh, yes. I mean, infrastructural changes are just booming in Guyana. Changes in compliance standards, Iris says. Yes, so there are lots and lots and lots of changes that we are, in fact, being bombarded by. And here is the challenge as we bring it to look at our public services and our organizations. There's a bit of a reality check that we have to um, um, we have to embrace. We really do have to embrace. And here is it. And this is a quotation from this publication. It was published by ECLAC last year. The publication is called the Technical, Operational, Political, and Prospective Institutional Capabilities for Managing Transformations. And of course, they focus on Latin America and the Caribbean. And this quotation says, the Latin America and the Caribbean has arrived at a crossroads on its development path. Indeed, we're at a crossroads. In spite of significant progress in many areas and a wealth of natural, human, and institutional resources to build on, the countries of the region face major obstacles in achieving more productive, inclusive, and sustainable growth. These challenges are not at all temporary. They derive from structural traps that perpetuate low growth, persistent inequality, and institutional as well as governance-related weaknesses, right? Especially when we talk about institutional and governance-related weaknesses, a lot of that infrastructure is not limited to the public service, but really relate to the public service, right? And so here we have all of these pressures. And trust me, we have not produced an exhaustive list in the chat to all of these pressures of change that are happening, coming at us from multiple angles, right? And here we are in our countries at this crossroads where things are really not what they ought to be. We still are facing major challenges in achieving higher levels of productivity, higher levels of inclusive and sustainable growth. And these are structural problems. They're not a one-off problem that will just go away. These are structural issues that we have in terms of our institutional capabilities. That same report goes on to talk about what do we need to do then in response to this challenge, these gaps that have been identified. And really what is required is that we need to build our institutional capabilities. And the functions of our institutions, particularly our public services, they need to be seen as dynamic functions rather than static attributes. And I want to let that sink in just a little bit because first of all, we don't want to confuse core values with the need to change. Our core values remain the same. The idea of transparency, inclusiveness, sustainability, accountability, right? Justice, equality. Those core values will remain, right? But how we achieve those things, how we administer and maintain and build on those core values, that has to be dynamic. That has to be dynamic because with all of the changes that are coming at us, we cannot afford to remain stuck. We cannot remain change resistant. We cannot be static. And so when we talk about building institutional capabilities, core to those capabilities has got to be adaptability, dynamism, flexibility. And so on the slide here, really, I'm pulling again from the same ECLAC report that I mentioned in the previous slide. And these are some quotes that came out of that report, right? And so these institutional mechanisms that we're talking about, right, these would allow public organizations to learn, experiment, transform their modus operandi amid changing conditions. So there is a recognition that the conditions are not going to one day just calm down. I mean, it's going to take a breather where there is no change, right? That is not going to happen. In fact, the change will continue to accelerate, okay? But what we need to do is to create the capabilities where our public services become learning organizations that can quickly experiment and transform how we operate, right? And there are three major mechanisms through which these capabilities can be coordinated. One is the identification and exploration of opportunities and threats. And it is done through strategic monitoring system, trend analysis, and active listening to our respective stakeholders, really gleaning what is really happening, right? And so, even as we mentioned this, some of the things I want us to ask ourselves about our public services. Do we, in fact, have in place strategic monitoring systems? Do we have in place um, um, a dedicated part of our public services that focuses on looking at research, looking at trend analyses, listening to stakeholders, seeing what is happening on the ground with stakeholders, but what is also happening globally, to understand and to actually explore the opportunities and the threats that exist. Then the second area is strategic experimentation. The truth of the matter is we have to try something, right? And these can be through things like prototypes, pilot tests, um, looking at policies that allow for alternatives to be evaluated before scaling up solutions. What we definitely don't want is to just run with one solution without thinking it through, right? Because we simply don't have the fiscal space for that level of mistake. So some mistakes have to be tolerated because experimentation does mean some mistakes, but it's how we manage it strategically. And the last area that they mention in this report is organizational reconfiguration, or the ability to redesign structures, reallocate resources, and scale up what works and discard what does not. And so at the core of that is flexibility. Flexibility. And so, we can't be hard enough and say, well, that is not my job. No, how we define jobs, and of course, jobs will still be defined, but how we do so has to be underpinned by flexibility and understanding that we oftentimes have to reconfigure quickly in order to meet the changing demands. We have to be able to not think in silos about our resources, but how can we reallocate, join up where we need to join up resources in order to respond to the environment. What we need to be able to ramp up quickly, and also not hanging on to things that are no longer serving any useful purpose, but to reallocate. But if you look at these two slides, let me go back to the previous slide. Now there's our reality, and then there is this ideal, as it were, where we need to go. That place where we have robust strategic monitoring systems and we're doing strategic experimentation and organizational reconfiguration. And you're probably thinking, but Lloyd, that sounds very nice. How do I get from one stage to the other stage? How do we get here? And so on this next slide, I want to just share some insights. And these insights relate to us individually as people navigating systems that have to be changed, need to be changed. Us as team leaders, guiding our team through dealing with change and transitioning through changes. And also looking at changes from a systemic perspective, right? And so how do we, in fact, become change ready to the point where we are, in fact, truly ready to understand change and to navigate that change effectively? And I think the first thing is that it is simply to face the music. To face the music. Sorry, I changed that a little too early. And that is not about saying everything is doom and gloom, but we do need to face the reality of our situation, right? We know, for instance, that there are some persons who do believe in the world that climate change is not a real thing. But we could say that. But guess what? What we cannot deny are the frequency of hurricanes, right? It is what it is. So in my home country, Jamaica, we had 2 hurricanes in 2 consecutive years, 2024 and 2025. I do not recall ever being, or our island ever being hit back to back by hurricanes. And one was bad enough, and the second one was even worse. Some people in Jamaica and Pat say it was worse, right? We have to face the music. What are the changes that we have to face up? That might be changed at an individual level, you know. Um, you might have to face the fact that, you know what, I do not have the ICT skills that I need to have. My team does not have it. Um, the world is changing, and there are other ways of delivering public services, and the public is demanding this, right? These are the things that we must face. We must face reality. There is nothing worse than lying to yourself. And so being able to face the music is absolutely important. The second thing I would point to is what I have here as readiness assessment. And so we don't want to be approaching change readiness in a very hit and miss kind of way. And there are many tools available on the market. If you want to access our assistance at CARICAD around this, please feel free to do so. It's one of the things that we do offer. Readiness assessment. We need to actually know amongst our various stakeholders, we need to know for ourselves, are we ready? What's the level of readiness, right? Because until you actually diagnose this, then you cannot come up with the appropriate strategies to help people to become change ready. You may find from a readiness assessment that some people are actually ready. They were ready yesterday, right? For others, not so much, right? And so, do we actually know the level of readiness? And even as you are assessing the readiness of your organization and teams for the change, you want to specifically look at your leaders, right? Um, Sometimes just by virtue of the authority structure within our public services, certain persons in certain positions automatically they are assigned as change champion or primary sponsor for major change initiatives. But that does not mean that they are ready to carry out that change champion role. That actually has to be assessed. Our leadership teams, our various managers and supervisors have a responsibility to help their teams to manage whatever changes and the transition towards the change that might be happening. But are they actually themselves capable? Are they themselves change ready? Because if leaders are not change ready themselves, they can't lead others along the path of change readiness. So this is the kind of depth of readiness assessment that is required. So, you can't know how much you need to become change ready unless you know where you're at, right? The third thing is what I'm calling strategic conversations. And I'm hoping that today, that is what we're having today, a strategic conversation, one of many. No, this is not to be confused with people just chatting and chatting and chatting and just chatting and chatting and chatting. No, the emphasis here is on the word strategic, right? And so strategic conversations are about understanding the changes. It's about asking the right powerful questions. What are we learning? What opportunities do these changes provide, right? What are the actual risks and how can we manage them? What can we learn from the past, right? Strategic conversation. Who might be some new partners that we need to have in order to collaborate to address the issues that we need to address, right? These are the kinds of strategic conversations that need to have. conversations that are taking us towards the vision for the change, strategic conversations for how we manage the process of change, right? And then change is risky. That's just the truth. Change is risky. And so risk management, risk assessment is going to be critical. And that is in part why we have partnered with CRIF to develop that risk management and assessment program, an integrated approach to that. And so really, really do look out for when we roll that out. We actually need to manage this, create better capacity around this, right? Because every change comes with risks, right? And it's not to avoid the risk. When I'm coaching clients around risk, I always make the distinction between risk management and risk avoidance. Risk avoidance is burying your head in the sand and saying it's not happening. I remember being at a table at a conference a couple of years ago, and our partners from INCOS was presenting around artificial intelligence and the changes and what to expect, etc., etc. And so I was at the table where I knew just by glancing around that I was the oldest person at that table. And the other people I would have made a guess were somewhere between late 20s and 30s. And one young lady just hissed her teeth. You know how we Caribbean people do? And she hissed her teeth and said, she is not going to be concerned about artificial intelligence until in our country we have reliable electricity supply. And she just dismissed it. And I was stunned, to be honest with you. But really that was risk avoidance, right? Yes, we still could have better, more sustainable, continuous electricity supply. But it doesn't mean all of these changes like artificial intelligence and all the things that you listed are going to go away because of that weakness. No, we have to deal with those weaknesses while managing all of those various things that are coming at us. And so we have to be very clear what the risks are, not to avoid them, not to be frozen by them, but to actually analyze them and to come up with your risk mitigation strategy. The next bullet there is adaptive planning. And here is the thing. Planning is still very much important, but you have to understand that planning now has to be adaptive. And so change readiness is not about abandoning planning altogether, but it's also about creating such adaptability and flexibility and agility so that, yes, we have plans. Yes, we have our line of sight to certain goals that we want to achieve for our public services, for our countries. But we have to be adaptable and agile in how we get there. And so our ability to be successful is going to be hinged on the ability to be adaptable, the ability to be agile, for ability for our plans to be flexible. So adaptive planning is also part of change readiness, right? And the last bullet I have here on this slide, and not the least, is emotional intelligence, right? And it's about building that capacity for emotional regulation and resilience, because change is hard. Let no one fool you. I teach the leading change workshop for CARICAD. We do a lot of capacity building around this. It is not with a view to say, oh, do these things and it will be easy. It is not. It is not easy. These tools can make you more successful. It can help you maybe avoid certain pitfalls. But the process is still going to be hard going. And we're only going to get through it by managing our emotions through the process, remaining emotionally intelligent through the process, building our resilience to deal with changes, especially when those changes come with setbacks, and very often they do, right? And that is a capability that has to be built not only at the individual level, but it has to be built in teams and in organization and across our public services. And just kind of leaning in on the emotional side of change and how we deal with it. Oftentimes, change brings anxiety, right? Change does bring anxiety, right? And if people are anxious about changes, if you are anxious about changes, please give yourself grace. Nothing is wrong with you. It is, in fact, quite normal, right? And so I found this infographic and thought I would share this about some healthy versus unhealthy ways for coping with anxiety, right? And so a lot of times we kind of think about the end point. When the change is fully implemented, this is what we want to see. But of course, it takes a while to get there. It takes a number of steps, right? They talk about the journey of 1,000 miles begin with one step. And so rather than being overwhelmed by things that, trigger anxiety, you want to think about what is the one small steps that we can take towards the change, right? The other unhealthy thing that we do sometimes is rumination. We do it at night. We allow our thoughts to get away with us, right? Instead, what is recommended is reflective problem solving. Not avoid the word, but name it. And to separate what you can and cannot control by choosing one actionable step. In the change process, becoming change ready is also about understanding that you're going to have a lot of emotions, sometimes conflicting emotions, strong emotions, some of them negative. Yeah. Not all emotions around change are positive, right? And that's okay, right? You don't need to suppress those emotions, but you need to allow them, feel them, and label them, right? But what you don't want to do is to embrace it as your own identity, right? And then the last thing that's on this is about having self-compassion. So change is going to be hard, right? Part of being change ready is just embracing that, yes, change is hard and you're doing the best that you can. And what's the one thing in that moment when it gets particularly hard? What's the one thing that you could do that would help you right now? Let me just pause here and look at some of the comments here. Yes. And so Cheryl, mentioned here that, BVI had 2 hurricanes in 1 month. Oh gosh, yes. Right. Rosemary says, the COVID-19 pandemic that we all went through, that actually forced a lot of agility and flexibility. So, things like virtual meetings actually became the norm, right? Omawale talks about risk management and avoidance. This is based on cultural assumptions. It makes it challenging with multiple generations in the workplace. And these are big issues. You are so very right. You are so very right. And so different generations might in fact approach change differently. No, I want us to be very clear. Do not hasten to say older workers are automatically resistant, right? And younger workers are automatically embracing. That isn't necessarily always the case. So we don't want to pigeonhole people as well. And which is why it's so important for that kind of readiness assessment to be done. All right. Some of the people who embrace change are people that really do so are people who are older than myself, to be honest with you, right? And so Omawale asks a question, not really a question, a statement, but it could also be posed as a question. And she said, we have to determine what does change readiness mean? What does it mean? And let us come back to exploring that some more when we come to the discussion segment, because that's so important, right? Because one of the things I have found is that you can be more or less ready to embrace one kind of change and yet not something else. You know, Rowan talks about music helping them. Absolutely, absolutely. But I'm almost at the end of my presentation, but let me just come to sharing a couple of other tools. This is one of our tools that we have developed at CARICAD, and this is our public sector transformation roadmap. All right. And so even as we think about being change ready, you will notice on this journey, you notice there's a nice road and the different points on the road. And you'll get this, of course, when you get the slide. So I'm not necessarily going to go through all of this, but you want to notice this area in the middle there, the change management, right? Where we have to recognize, and this here is actually based on the Kata 8-step it change leadership model, right? Where it talks about, the need for agile leadership, creating that sense of urgency. Why do we need to change? What will happen if we don't change? You have to put in place resources, including a guiding coalition, a team, when you call it a change management team, project team, steering committee. People call it all kind of different things. But really, the change has to be led, right? And you have to have dedicated people who are accountable for that leadership, helping to create that vision, communicating that vision, and bringing that vision to life through empowering people to take action, right? All of those things. The people side of change is really about helping people to become change ready, right? And so that's absolutely going to be critical if we're going to achieve all these other things along the road to transformation, okay? This is another tool which many of you might be very much acquainted with, taken from ProSci, and it talks about their ADKAR model, which is the individual model for change. And so being change ready is about helping people to get to the place where not only do they understand the change, but they're able to actually make the change. And so if people don't actually change in terms of the how they work, their mindset towards work, whether they're changing the technology, the business process, whatever that change is, if something actually doesn't change and nothing actually has changed. Okay? And so in the ADKAR model, which is an acronym that stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement, you know, you have to ask yourself at the A, how aware are people for the need of the change, right? You have to have clarification. What is changing? Why? How? And so what? Because we don't really expect people to just embrace change for change's sake, right? There has to be communication that is early and consistent, right? You have to be able to explain to people the risk of doing nothing. Okay? And the D is the desire. I love to also think of the D as decision, yes? And so, do people have the desire for the change? That's very important because there's a difference between yes, you need to change, but do you want to change? And that is sometimes where the crux of the matter is, right? And so, for those of us who have change leadership roles, you have to be able to connect the change to the benefits, address concerns openly, not hide from them, engage advocates to build momentum. The K stands for knowledge. Do people have the knowledge to make the change? So, yes, they might want to engage, but they have to know, they have to have some knowledge. Have to know how to make that change. You have to clarify and explain the new ways of thinking, the new ways of working, right? Provide role relevant training, make learning accessible. And ability really talks about the demonstration of the change. Ability, right? Do people actually know? Can they actually execute the change? Can they use that new software? Can they use the new customer service protocols? Can they use the new technology? Right? And so this is where we're talking about, people having hands-on practice space. And when there are hiccups, allow time for more practice and adjustments. And the last in the acronym is R. What are the right reinforcements to sustain the change? And so change readiness is also about not just change readiness for this specific change that we're dealing with today, but it's also about readiness for future changes. And here is the thing: how we sustain the present change initiative is going to impact the ability of people to be ready for the next change. And so this is where sometimes we break down. How many times have you seen, institutions implement new softwares, systems, ICT systems for certain business processes, and as soon as something happens and it has hiccup, suddenly we just take our time, and go right back to using the manual files. And that's because we have not put in place the right reinforcements to sustain the change. All right. So, some parting thoughts before I open up for some discussion. Here are some things to think about. Behind every act of resistance is fear. We so often talk about resistance to change with such a distaste in our mouths, right? As if people who resist change are evil. And really, all of us as human beings at some point resist change. And really, at the foundation of change resistance is actually fear. And so that is part of the strategic conversation that we need to be able to have, and the kind of support that we need to provide to people. So we kind of get to what is the actual fear underneath all of this? What is it really? And let us unpack it. Some fears might be real. So if there's a real danger, for instance, that the change might result in job loss, then we need to face that. Some fear is just imagined. We're just ruminating on this, coming up with worst case scenarios in our head, but it's not real. But we have to get to the root fear behind resistance. Until we address the fear, people can't be change ready. The second parting thought is this: leaders cannot lead changes that they do not understand nor embrace. So the preparation of the leaders, they have to understand it, not as leaders first, but as individual employees first, before they can lead their teams to embrace and to go along the journey of change. And here's the third point: nothing changes if nothing changes. I saw that on social media a few years ago and I never forgot it. So we'll never be change ready if we're never willing to change. We're never willing to actually push the change. Nothing changes if nothing changes. The fourth parting thought is focus on your locus of control. Part of the challenge of change is that when it is so much, we feel out of control. But in fact, you do have some control over something. You have at least control over your emotions and how you choose to respond, right? And if you really have those strategic conversations about, okay, so what is in our control? What is it that we can, in fact, do, and focus most of our energies there, you're likely to become more resilient, more change ready. Fifth, not I'm so sorry. Not everyone gets change ready at the same pace. It's supposed to be everyone. I apologize. Not everyone gets change ready at the same pace. Okay? Like I said, some people, they were ready from last year. And for some others, they are not ready. And people change and become change ready at different paces. And that is the conundrum of change leadership, that there's an urgency that we have to communicate, and we have to balance that with the fact that not everybody embraces change immediately, and some people need more time, more communication, more support than others. That is a polarity to manage. And last but not least, you are not alone. CARICAD is here to support you all to be change ready, for your organization to become change ready. But not just CARICAD. Let me tell you something. There is help available all around us if we are prepared to reach out, investigate it, ask questions, collaborate with others. Do not be prideful. If you need help, your organization needs help, your public services need help, help is there. Simply reach out for it. And so then that is the end of my presentation. And I want to open the floor now for comments or questions. And I see one immediately here. Well, I'm going to take a comment from one of our associate consultants, Hilary Alexander. Welcome, Hilary. A positive outlook, perspective. That's important to be able to see the positives or the new opportunities. Indeed. And it's important to ask yourself, what is the opportunity in this? What is the opportunity in this? And no matter how tragic something is, there is an opportunity in it. Okay? Ashley is asking a number of questions. Who decides when and how, the when and how of change? Is it the people? Is it economics, trade alliances, the wealthy, the ability of a nation, partial cohesive measures from larger countries? Ashley, that is a good, those are important questions. And the truth of the matter is that on the one hand, and we are in fact in a public service kind of space here, right? And so public service changes are going to, of course, be mandated from the policymakers, the political directorate, right? But they do not, we live thankfully in societies that are democratic and politicians are elected by the people. So people can, in fact, bring pressure to bear for changes to happen. And there's also the fact that there are just pressures around us that help to bring change, right? So, for example, the expansion of social media and the range of social media platforms, that has in fact created a space where, in fact, more and more public services are then including social media as a part of their communication, integral part of their communication strategy, right? That was the pressure that came from external to bear on that, Thank you for those questions, Ashley. Any other questions or comments? And you can type those in the chat, or you can raise your hand. Roger will help me to identify those raised hands, and we can allow you to unmute and share those questions or comments. So Keturah says, what is your perspective on compliance-based leadership and its role in driving change? All right, now, here is the beauty of technology. Before I answer this question or attempt, well, anybody can answer really. I don't think it has to be me alone. I am not lying to you. I'm going on my trusted Google and to see what exactly do we mean by compliance-based leadership. And so the thing is so swift. It says, compliance-based leadership focuses on establishing a robust culture of ethical conduct and regulatory adherence by embedding policies into the organizational DNA rather than just enforcing rules to avoid penalties. All right, Keturah. So now that we all have make sure we all have a common understanding of what we mean by compliance-based leadership. And does it have a role in driving change? And I want to say, yes, it does. Because it doesn't matter what the change is. If you're moving from some manual system to a system that is ICT enabled, AI enabled, that change has to be underpinned by robust ethics and some kind of regulation, or else those things will become abusive. You'll have things like breaches of data protection, misinformation, misuse, etc. And so that is also one of those things that has to be balanced, because somebody might say, a compliance-based approach means that you're kind of slowing things down, you're not changing, you're not moving. No, compliance-based leadership can embrace flexibility while at the same time understanding that we cannot forget the ethical basis of what we do and how we conduct public service business. Thank you for that question, Katura. So Arvin has a comment here. So Arvin says his interpretation of change readiness is how flexible, adaptive, and receptive an individual or an organization is in responding to a change process or requirement. I love that, Arvin. That is a very, very good and succinct definition indeed, right? And like I said before, it is entirely possible for an organization, they can be fully change ready when it comes to one change process, but not as change ready when it comes to another process. Okay. So for example, people might be change ready for, dealing with a human resource information system that is, ICT enabled. They might be fully ready for that and run with that. But they might not be ready for their organization to be merged with another organization. Yeah. So it's sort of then for every change that we are sensitive to the level of readiness, because that can vary. All right. Denise has a comment here in the chat. And so a kind of long comment, but a very useful one. So let's look at Denise's comment. Here's another question from Chantel. How do we effectively manage the fears of employees during period of transition while ensuring the strategic goals of the organization are met? There is a concept that we cover in our Leading Change workshop. We talk about the change curve. And it talks about the fact that people go through different kinds of emotional states during different points in the transition phase of any change, right? So when change is first announced, people normally are kind of shocked, they're surprised. They might even go into denial. And then as people start to learn more, very often things can get worse before they get better. Let's just be clear. People start to get very anxious, very fearful, might get very angry. All right. And so there are, in fact, strategies that you can do to minimize, how things happen along that curve. And it really is about understanding, not denying the emotional state, but understanding where they're at and what then are the support strategies that you need to put in place, right? So I have found in my experience, and so myself and Hillary, we used to do a lot of work in public sector transformation in the government of Jamaica. Sometimes there's a lot of coaching and counseling that has to happen to help people to deal with those fears. Sometimes we have to have workshops that help to empower people to embrace the change. So, for example, a lot of the changes that we undertook required people to reapply for positions in newly created executive agencies. And for some persons, it was years that they had, done a resume, done a job interview. And so we actually had workshops to help them to know how to prepare their resume, how to navigate a job selection process. All right. All right. So, there are so many comments I'm seeing here in the chat, and we're almost winding down to the end. So forgive me if I'm not able to answer all of the questions. There is a question here from Nisha. What is your take to bring about change in an environment where there's a culture of lack of accountability? Ay, 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 ay. That's a huge question. And here's the thing. If people are just simply not ready to be accountable, then the change isn't going to happen. I have never seen change happen in an atmosphere where there's a lack of accountability. If other people have seen it, well, you let me know. But I've never seen, certainly not effective change. You might change for the worse, yes, but effective change that actually leads to transformation, improvement, change that is sustainable, value added, um, has to happen in an environment where people decide to be accountable for the results that they're trying to achieve through the change. I've never seen it happen otherwise. So if there's a lack of accountability, chances are that is a sign of people not being change ready. All right. So folks, because we are winding down, I am just going to wrap up with our announcements, right? And let me just share now our transformational leadership development program. It is starting next month. Now, the deadline for receiving applications, and I apologize, I see my announcements is missing an N. We will adjust that. But if you wish to submit an application, there are still spaces left. And so you want to get in that application, reach out to us this week. All right. Our next webinar will be on February 17 next month at the same time. And so you can look out for that webinar advertisement. The facilitator for that webinar will be a regional organizational transformation consultant, Mr. Robert Winter. And soon and very soon, CARICAD will be launching its artificial intelligence adoption survey. And so many of you might be asked to be survey respondents. We're asking you, please respond. Without data, we can't really know where we're at and how it is that CARICAD can support our public services in the adoption, the useful and ethical adoption of artificial intelligence. But we need to assess what is the level of adoption now. And no, it's not zero. There is some adoption happening. And so I want you to look out for that survey and to participate in it where that is applicable to you. And so in the chat, there is a link that Roger has put if you want to get more information about the work, the Transformational Leadership Development Program. Just click on that link for more information. And also to learn more about us, you want more information about our services, how we can access those services, contact us at info@caricad.net. Visit our website, www.caricad.net. We are on social media, so look for us on Instagram or Facebook page, Twitter, LinkedIn, and of course, our YouTube channel, where you can see past webinars as well as other material. So please do look out for that. And last but not least, we want to ask you to just fill out our webinar evaluation. You'll see that in the chat. You see evaluation poll. Just click on that. It's a very short poll, but we like to know how you found the webinar. Are there other ideas that you have for webinar topics you would like us to cover in the future? That is an opportunity and a space for us to share that information with us. And with that, it's just for me now to say thank you. Thank you for your engagement. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for showing up. So many of you, 191 persons are here live. And I know there are others who registered, weren't able to be with us, but you will be watching the recording after the fact. Please do reach out to us if you have any further questions, suggestions. I see all the thanks in the chat, Lisa, Crystal, Marsha, and others. And so we just want to thank you and wish for you the very best for 2026 and see you at our next webinar next month, February 17th. Same time, same space. Thank you all very much.